friend, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I'm Miss Espinosa and I am a kinder teacher in Texas. Today I'm going to be breaking down 10 different tips and suggestions for first year pre-K and kinder teachers on what they can do over the summer to prep for the beginning of the school year. And I will also be referencing some free resources that will help you in this process. Stick around for the end of the video where I'm going to break down this classroom procedures and routines checklist and this back to school classroom setup checklist. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I would suggest for any first year teacher is to get acquainted with your state standards. Texas, for example, has the Texas Pre-Kindergarten Guidelines that is exclusively for pre-K, and then kindergarten through 12th grade follows the TEKS. And honestly, when I was teaching pre-K, I absolutely love the Texas Pre-K Guidelines because they're divided into 10 domains and they are very age appropriate versus the kinder TEKS. It still overwhelms me to look at those. So if you look through your standards and you're having trouble trying to unpack the standards because sometimes they throw in a lot into one standard, I would encourage you to try and find resources that help you understand what that standard is talking about. So a resource that might be beneficial, for example, would be finding child-friendly I can statements of those standards. I made these child-friendly I can statement for the Texas Pre-Kindergarten Guidelines, and it honestly took me a little while to get these done, but it was so worth it. At the top, I list the Texas Pre-K standard, and then I write it in an I can statement in a child-friendly way. I also include pictures, and if you're able to find a product that you like, I would encourage you to go ahead and prep it. All of these are prepped and ready to go, so you would just pull out the objectives that you're teaching for the week and display them on your objectives wall or objectives area. The second thing on the list would be to start thinking about teacher meet and greet. It's always really exciting to meet your kids and the parents for the first time, so there's definitely some things that you can have ready before that day. As an example, something that I always have printed and ready on that teacher meet and greet day is this little student survey that the parents fill out that helps me determine important information for that child. Like if the child has allergies, any health or diet concerns. I always ask what their cultural background is and what languages that speak at home, because the majority of my students are English language learners and they speak other languages at home. So I love learning about what country they're from, what languages they speak. That's really important to me. When I have the parent numbers and their language, I go ahead and input them into Talking Points, which is a free app, and Talking Points can translate into over 100 languages, which is super cool. And I know that Class Dojo does translate, but the languages that my students speak I cannot find on Class Dojo, and the parents don't need to download that app. They will just receive your messages as text messages, and you can send class announcement or you can send individual messages, you can send pictures. But it's very cool because you type it out in English and it will send it to them in their language. They can respond in their language and it will translate back to you. Other things that I ask are if the student has any siblings, what grade are they in? You definitely want to know how that child will get home that first day of school, and then just a couple other things like what do they enjoy doing at home and if they have any fears or weaknesses. So this gives me a brief idea on the student and their family. Something else that you can make is a teacher introduction letter. There's lots of different templates for that. I know Foxwell Forest has a good template for that, and I've also seen this very popular editable resource by Learning in Wonderland. I'll link both of those in the description. Third on the list would be to definitely get some sort of planner because you want to be as organized as you can. So if you find your district or county's academic calendar for the school year, I would go ahead and write those dates down in your planner. I'm personally not very picky about the kind of planner that I get. I just like it to be like notebook sized, and I always just pick from whatever they have at Target. So this year I got the simplified planner, and this is my first time getting this specific planner. And I am a paper and pen kind of gal, so I always just handwrite my to-do list and scratch it off as I get it done. Tip number 4 would be if you're able to have access to your daily schedule, that will really help you think about how you want your day to flow like. If you have your daily schedule and you know for certain that that's how your day is gonna flow, I would also print out a visual daily schedule for your kids. It is a must have in your classroom, a visual schedule, so that kids can see this is how we start our day, move through our day, and we always go home at the end of the day. And that way it also reinforces the routine that you're trying to establish. Number 5 would be if you're able to have access to your curriculum pacing guide, I would suggest that you look at that so you have an idea of what your year is going to look like. What are you going to teach? And that way you can also start thinking about whether you will need extra supplemental resources for your curriculum. If you are starting from scratch and your district or your county, your school, for whatever reason does not have a curriculum pacing guide, the Printable Princess has a free kinder curriculum guide, and Pre-K Pages has a pre-K curriculum guide. So if you really don't know where to start from or you need some direction, those are 2 free resources that will kind of get you started. And the third resource is actually a resource that I just discovered from Teach Pre-K, and this was a free editable PDF download. It's just a blank calendar, and on the side you can see theme, dramatic play, block, sensory, letter. So I'm honestly just gonna scratch that off and kind of write in what my centers are going to be, just so I have a rough idea of what I'm teaching for the month. And I printed mine because, again, I am a paper and pen kind of gal, so I'm gonna write it in, but this is an editable PDF and I'll link it below. So tip number 6 would be to start thinking about those skill-based centers and to start gathering resources. There is a plethora of free resources created by teachers for teachers, so I encourage you to follow other teachers on Instagram. A lot of the time they share their resources through Instagram and they'll refer you back to their Teachers by Teachers or their blogs. But there's definitely lots of free resources out there. Some centers that you might want to start thinking about are alphabet centers, beginning sounds, CVC words, sight words, digraphs, syllables, rhyming. And I am going to make a video in the near future where I'll share some awesome free resources for all of those skill-based centers. So keep a lookout for that. So tip number 7 would be to create a classroom wish list and share it with your family and friends. Especially if you just graduated, I would share that list with everybody that I know and just ask for their support, because as a new teacher, you're probably going to be spending a lot out of pocket, but also don't feel like you have to buy everything your first year. And if you don't know what kinds of things to put on your wish list, then I'm going to refer you to my 30 must-have classroom supplies video. I put that together very thoughtfully, and everything in that list is very purposeful. I'll link my video down below, and I think that'll really help you get started. And the one thing I don't have on the list though is books, because that's just a whole other thing on its own. So if you think you're not gonna have any books, I would also include some books on your list. You can look through teacher blogs and teacher Facebook groups. There's a ton of suggestions for must-have books. And I also did record one video where I share books based on theme, so you're welcome to check that out as well. Tip number 8 would be to start thinking about what kinds of activities you want to have for the first 2 weeks of school. Those first 2 weeks especially are crucial for your students to adjust to your new classroom, the new routines and procedures. So keep your activities simple. Pre-K and kinder students need to learn how to use scissors and glue appropriately, so you can have some cutting activities to make sure that you are going over those scissors and glue expectations. And overall, I would really just recommend a lot of fine motor activities. I let my kids play with the manipulatives, but of course I give them the expectations first. These letters do not go in your mouth. They do not go on the floor. They do not go in your pocket. They go back into the bin. Tip number 9 would be to start thinking about what kind of classroom management behavior system you want to have in place. And there's literally hundreds of things that you can do in your classroom, and every classroom is so unique as to what systems that teacher has in place. When we talk about classroom management, it's such a big umbrella of components, so I will also be making a whole separate video on classroom management. And lastly, let's go over these checklists. I'm going to start with the classroom procedures and routines checklist first. So your procedures start when your kids arrive in the classroom. What is that going to look like? Are you standing at the door and greeting your kids? I highly recommend it because you are setting the tone for the day. And this was something that I learned from my mentor teacher when I was student teaching. Every single morning she was standing at the door and she would greet her kids, "Good morning, so-and-so," and then she would ask if they would want a hug or a high five. So not only does it set the tone for the morning, but as your students are coming into the classroom, you can tell if they've had a rough morning. I've definitely had kids that walk in crying in the morning because their parents were yelling at them to hurry up and get ready. Or maybe they're just really sleepy. But if something is up with that student, you'll be able to tell and you can pull them aside and have a conversation about how they're feeling that morning, what's going on. Whatever happened, reassure them that they're in the classroom now, they're gonna be okay, we're gonna have a great day. If your students have breakfast in the classroom, what is that going to look like? I have a trash helper that makes sure that the trash isn't overflowing because their trash can is super small. My students also know that if they open their milk and don't finish it, they need to pour it down the sink. So just think about breakfast procedures if they are having it in the classroom. Next would be morning meeting. What do you want your morning meeting time to look like? Classroom rules or commitments. Your daily schedule. Again, make sure that you have a visual daily schedule and talk to your kids about what your day is going to look like. How do you want your kids to sit during whole group time? Are they going to have assigned spots? Will there be any teacher signals that you need to teach your kids? And going back to student teaching again, there was 2 universal hand signals that the students at that school used, and it was very neat because since it was universal, for example, if they went with the music teacher would know what this means. The music teacher would know what this means. So if students have to use the restroom without interrupting, they just cross their fingers and go like this. That means they need to go to the restroom, and a simple thumbs up means go ahead. And if a student was sharing something, it was their turn to talk, and you're listening to that friend, you can relate to whatever they're saying or you agree, they would like nod with their finger. So that's just a couple of ideas on hand signals. You can definitely search for more. Are you going to have classroom jobs? If so, think about your classroom job system. How often are you going to rotate? What are your jobs going to be? Are you going to have a job for every student? Or again, are you going to rotate? How often are you going to rotate? Where are you going to display? Next would be how to line up. You have to teach your kids what your expectations are when they line up. Are they having assigned line spots? What does a good line look like? What should their body be doing when they are in line? I keep it very simple. We are not talking when we are in the hallway because other kids are learning. We cannot be noisy in the hallway. I don't make my kids put their hands behind their back. I think that's unnatural. They can leave them on their side. As long as they keep their hands to themselves, that is what matters. And they know that my biggest pet peeve is for them to be touching those bulletin boards or the walls. That is a big no-no for me. Next would be, how do your students use the restroom? Do you have a restroom in class? Do they need to go outside the class? Are you gonna have a hall pass? What is your system for the restroom? You also need to teach them lunch expectations, recess expectations, how to use your classroom supplies. And are you going to have some communal classroom supplies? Will you have individual classroom supplies? This past year, because of COVID, my students have individual supplies and it drove me nuts. I've always had communal supplies and I will continue to do so. How are your students going to clean up their supplies? You need to go over center expectations. What does it look like for them to be working well independently? How are they going to rotate in centers, or what kind of center management system are you going to have in place? How are you going to make sure that the noise level doesn't get crazy? How are your students going to ask for help? Where do they turn in their work? Keep in mind you'll have early finishers. What can early finishers do when they're done? Also think about small group expectations, nap or snack time, packing up for the day, and lastly, dismissal. So these are all the things I would start thinking about. And if your kids are not following your rules and procedures like you want to, then you need to stop them and reteach it again until they're doing it the way that you want. It's a pain in the butt like the first 6 weeks of school, but once they get that routine, it makes your life so much easier. So you are welcome to add in anything that I did not include. And I also have this blank one so you can print it and write it in. All right, and lastly would be the back to school classroom setup checklist. So when I first walk into a classroom, the first thing I like to do is arrange the furniture. So in order to do that, you should have an idea of how many centers you're gonna have in the classroom. You also need to keep in mind where you're going to set up your carpet or your rug, or if you don't want a carpet or rug, where is your whole group area going to be? Some teachers prefer a teacher desk, other teachers don't like teacher desks, but if you do, where is that going to be? Make sure that it's in a spot in your classroom where you can still see your students. Next will be where you're going to set up your calendar and what kinds of things do you want to have in your calendar area. I just have a $3 Dr. Seuss themed calendar that I bought from the Target dollar store like my first year of teaching. So I laminated it, put some magnetic tape on it, and for my numbers for the month, they are themed. And I just went on Pinterest and I literally just searched free November calendar numbers, free December calendar numbers, and trust me, you will find a ton for free. So that's actually something else that you can prep if you want them themed. Next, I would recommend leaving a space on your wall for objectives. Think about all of the learning visuals that you will need. And don't feel like you have to cover up every inch of wall space because you do not. That's really overwhelming to look like. I like to be very purposeful on things that I put on my wall and make sure that it's things that my kids can reference back to. So 2 must-haves for pre-K and kinder classrooms, I think, are definitely alphabet posters and number posters. Are you going to have a word wall or a sound wall? If you are unfamiliar with sound walls, you can definitely research. There's lots of teachers that share what their sound wall looks like in their classrooms, in their blogs. Next would be, where are you putting that daily schedule? Where are your manipulatives going? How are you setting up your classroom library? What are your center areas? And I would encourage you to label those. Make sure that you have a small group table. Where are you going to keep your extra classroom supplies or cleaning supplies? Think about student seating. What kind of seating are you going to have? Are students going to have assigned seating spots? Where are students going to keep their things? Are they going to have student mailboxes, student cubbies? You probably need to label those as well. Student jobs. Where are you going to display your student jobs? And then the last few things on this list are kind of thinking ahead to that first day of school. So make sure you have student name tags ready. Think about those teacher meet and greet handouts. Make sure that you have a student transportation list. And then the last 3 things would be to have your first week of school lesson plans, your first week of school activities, and your first day of school materials ready. That is it, y'all. Those are my suggestions for teachers that are trying to prep over the summer. I really hope that these suggestions helped you, and if they did, please make sure to give my video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss my future videos. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.